I arrived at the Grand Oak Hotel ballroom, where my daughter Jessica's wedding was about to begin. I wore my best suit, carried a gift, my heart full of pride. But when I approached the entrance, Jessica appeared in her white dress, face cold and distant. She blocked my path and said words that shattered me. "Dad, I'm sorry, but you weren't invited. You need to go away." 200 guests watched. My ex-wife Linda smirked from the doorway. I stood frozen, humiliated, as my daughter turned her back on me. I drove away from that hotel with hands shaking on the steering wheel. Tears blurred my vision so badly I had to pull into a rest stop parking lot. I just sat there in the silence of my car, staring at nothing. The image of Jessica's cold face kept replaying in my mind. That wasn't my little girl. That wasn't the child I'd raised, loved, sacrificed everything for. Memories flooded back like a dam breaking. I remembered teaching her to ride a bike on our street, running beside her, my hand on the seat until she was ready. I remembered her high school graduation, how she'd hugged me and said I was the best father in the world. I remembered those late-night talks when she was scared about leaving for college, when she'd come to my room and we'd talk until 3 a.m. about her dreams and fears. I remembered the months of wedding planning, every single check I'd written, every conversation where she'd been excited, showing me venue options, asking my opinion on flowers and music. When had things changed? When had my daughter become this stranger who could look at me with such coldness? I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers, opened my banking app. I'd kept a detailed list of all the wedding vendors, every contract, every payment. It was how I operated in my construction supply business. Stay organized, keep records, know where every dollar goes. The numbers stared back at me from the screen. The Grand Oak Hotel, $48,000. The catering company, Elegant Affairs, $32,000. The photographer, some award-winning artist Jessica had insisted on, $8,000. The band, a jazz ensemble from Chicago, $12,000. The florist, $9,000. Even the cake from that fancy bakery, $3,000, $112,000 total. Every single cent had come from my savings, from the inheritance my late parents had left me, money I'd been setting aside specifically for Jessica's future, for her wedding day, for helping her start her life. And she'd just told me I wasn't invited. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger exactly. It was clarity. Cold, hard clarity. I started making calls. First, the Grand Oak Hotel. The manager answered on the third ring. "This is Harry Thompson. I need to cancel the wedding scheduled for today." There was a pause. "Sir, the event is happening right now. We can't possibly." "Check your contract," I said, my voice steady. "Section 7, paragraph 3. The party paying for the event has the right to cancel up to 2 hours before the ceremony with forfeiture of the deposit but no additional charges. I'm well within that window." Another pause. "Mr. Thompson, please. There are 200 guests. I'm not invited to that wedding," I said. "I'm just a stranger, and strangers don't pay for weddings. Cancel it." I hung up before he could argue further. Next, the catering company. The woman who answered was sympathetic when I explained the situation in simple terms. My daughter had disinvited me from the wedding I was paying for. She understood. The cancellation went through. One by one, I called every vendor. The photographer was in the middle of setting up but agreed to leave. The band was already at the venue. They packed up. The florist had just finished the arrangements. I told her to take them back. 90 minutes. That's all it took to dismantle everything. My phone rang. Jessica's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "What have you done?" she was screaming. Actually screaming. "The hotel just told us everything's canceled. Dad, you're ruining my wedding. How could you do this to me?" The irony wasn't lost on me. How could I do this to her? "I wasn't invited, Jessica," I said calmly. "You made that very clear in front of 200 people. I'm just a stranger now, and strangers don't pay for weddings." "But you promised. You said you'd take care of everything. That was when I was your father, when I was part of your life. You just told me I'm not, so I'm acting accordingly." I hung up. For about 10 minutes there was silence. I sat in that parking lot, watching cars pass on the highway, feeling strangely empty. Then my phone rang again. Not Jessica this time. A number I didn't recognize. "Is this Harry Thompson?" The voice was male, young, confident, aggressive. "Who's asking?" "This is Brandon Chen, your daughter's husband. Well, almost husband, until you decided to throw your little tantrum. Brandon, the lawyer. The man Jessica had been dating for 2 years. The man I'd met exactly 3 times, each meeting leaving me with a vague sense of unease I'd never been able to articulate. I'm not discussing this with you, Brandon. Oh, you'll discuss it. Because you just made the biggest mistake of your life, old man. His voice turned cold, professional. I'm an attorney at Morrison & Associates. You signed financial commitments, binding contracts. We're going to sue you for breach of contract, intentional interference with business relations, emotional distress, and reputational damage. I'm going to take everything you have. Your business, your house, your retirement, everything. You're going to wish you just showed up, sat in the back, and kept your mouth shut. My heart started pounding. This wasn't an angry son-in-law venting. This was a lawyer making a calculated threat. You can't sue me for canceling contracts I paid for. Watch me. See you in court, Harry. He hung up. I sat there, phone in my hand, and realized something terrible. This wasn't over. This was just beginning. The next morning, I woke to someone pounding on my door. I'd barely slept, tossing and turning all night, my mind replaying everything. When I opened the door, a courier stood there with a thick envelope. Harry Thompson? That's me. You've been served. He handed me the envelope and left. I stood in my doorway in my bathrobe, holding what I somehow knew would be bad news. I was right. Inside was a lawsuit filing. Morrison & Associates, on behalf of Brandon Chen and Jessica Thompson Chen, versus Harry Thompson. The number at the top of the claim made my stomach drop. $250,000. I had to sit down. $250,000. The wedding costs, plus damages for emotional distress, reputational harm, and something called intentional infliction of emotional distress. There were 30 pages of legal language I could barely understand. My coffee went cold on the kitchen table as I read through it. Brandon had moved fast. The filing was dated yesterday evening. He must have gone straight from that phone call to his office to draw this up. I needed to understand how this had happened. How had I gone from being Jessica's beloved father to being sued by her? The divorce from Linda had happened 8 years ago. I'd come home from work one day to find her crying at the kitchen table. She'd been having an affair with a man named Gregory Walsh, a real estate investor. She wanted a divorce. I'd been devastated, but I didn't fight her. I just wanted her to be happy, even if it wasn't with me. Jessica had been 22 then, just out of college. She'd been angry at her mother initially. She'd stayed close to me. We'd had dinner every week. She'd call me for advice. Those had been good years, despite the pain of the divorce. But then, 2 years ago, she'd met Brandon at some charity function. He was a lawyer at a prestigious firm. Handsome, successful, charming. Linda had approved of him immediately, which should have been my first warning sign. Linda had invited Brandon to family dinners. She'd encouraged the relationship aggressively. Slowly, over those 2 years, I'd watched Jessica change. She started canceling our dinners. When we did meet, she seemed distant. She'd make little comments. Mom says you were always controlling. Brandon thinks you have boundary issues. Maybe the divorce wasn't all Mom's fault. I'd tried to address it, to ask what was wrong, but Jessica would just shut down or change the subject. And then, 6 months ago, she'd gotten engaged. The wedding planning had started. I'd been included, but always at arm's length. Linda was there for every decision. Brandon hovered constantly. I was just the checkbook. Now, sitting with this lawsuit in my hands, I realized I'd been set up, but I couldn't understand why. What had I done to deserve this? My phone rang. Frank Morrison. Not Brandon's firm, but my lawyer. Frank had been my father's friend, and he'd handled my business legal work for 20 years. Harry, I just heard. Are you okay? I've been better, Frank. Can you come to my office? We need to talk about this. An hour later, I sat across from Frank in his downtown office. He'd reviewed the lawsuit. Harry, they're claiming you made binding commitments to these vendors. But here's the problem. Brandon knows the law inside and out. He's structured this lawsuit to be expensive to fight, even if you'd ultimately win. The legal fees alone could cost you $60,000. Maybe more. I don't have $60,000, Frank. I spent everything on the wedding. Frank's face was grave. That's what concerns me. I think that might be the point. What do you mean? Brandon filed emergency motions with this lawsuit. He's asking the court to freeze your business accounts, claiming you're hiding assets to avoid paying a judgment. Harry, he's trying to strangle you financially. If the judge grants this, you won't be able to operate your business or defend yourself effectively. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. He can do that? With the right judge and the right arguments, yes. The hearing is tomorrow at 2. I drove to my business after leaving Frank's office. Thompson Construction Supply had been my father's creation. He'd started it 40 years ago, with nothing but a truck and a dream. I'd taken it over when he retired, grown it into something solid and respectable. We weren't huge, but we were known for quality and reliability. My office manager, Brenda Palmer, met me at the door. She'd been with me for 15 years. Since her kids were small, she was crying. "Harry, what's happening?" the bank called. "They said our operating account is frozen. We can't pay the suppliers. We have 3 big jobs starting Monday, and we can't buy materials." I explained everything to Brenda. Her face went pale. "That man is trying to destroy you." "That's exactly what he's doing." I spent the rest of the day trying to manage the crisis, calling suppliers, explaining the situation, begging for patience. Some were understanding, others weren't. By evening, I was exhausted and defeated. I tried calling Jessica one more time. She answered, but her voice was like ice. "What do you want, Dad?" "Jessica, please, can we talk? Can we just sit down and—" "No. Dad, you brought this on yourself." Brandon explained everything to me. "You were trying to manipulate me through money. You never really loved me. You just wanted control. Mom has been telling me for years, and I didn't want to believe it. But Brandon helped me see the truth. Maybe I never really knew you at all." "Sweetheart, that's not true. I love you more than—" She hung up. I sat in my empty office as the sun set. I was facing financial ruin. My daughter believed lies about me, and the legal system was being weaponized to destroy everything my father had built. 1 week later, my life had become a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The judge had granted Brandon's emergency motion. My business accounts were frozen. Thompson Construction Supply was hemorrhaging money and reputation. Employees kept calling, asking about paychecks that weren't coming. Brenda was trying to hold things together, but I could see the strain on her face. She had 2 kids in college. She needed this job. Suppliers were threatening to stop deliveries entirely. Some already had. I'd built relationships with these people over decades. Now they were walking away, and I couldn't blame them. Frank called me with news that made everything worse. "Harry, I've been digging into Brandon's background. He has connections you didn't know about. His firm, Morrison & Associates, represents several major construction companies in the region. Brandon has been making calls." "What kind of calls?" "He's spreading rumors, telling people you're financially unstable, that you're facing major lawsuits, that you're not reliable. Harry, 3 of your biggest clients just canceled their contracts." I closed my eyes. "Those 3 contracts represented about 40% of my annual revenue. There's more," Frank continued. "I think this was planned. All of it." "What do you mean?" "Brandon didn't just happen to meet Jessica. He targeted her. I found records showing he researched her family background before that charity event where they supposedly met by chance. He knew about your business. He knew about the property." "What property?" "Your business sits on 8 acres of prime commercial real estate in the Jefferson Heights development zone. Harry, that land is worth at least $3 million. Maybe more. If you go bankrupt, it goes into foreclosure. Brandon's firm could buy it cheap through a shell company." The pieces started falling into place. This wasn't about a wedding. It wasn't even really about Jessica. This was a calculated business move. He's going to marry my daughter just to steal my property? If he can destroy you financially first, yes. And Harry, there's more. Brandon's firm wants to expand into construction litigation. Your business failure would give them a foothold in the industry. They could pick up your clients, your contracts, everything. I felt sick. That afternoon, Jessica showed up at my office. But she wasn't there to reconcile. She had more legal papers. "What's this?" I asked. "Brandon helped me understand something, Dad. You financially abused me my whole childhood." "What are you talking about?" "Mom's parents set up a trust fund for me when I was born. $50,000. You were supposed to manage it until I turned 25. Where's that money, Dad?" I stared at her. "Jessica, that trust was dissolved when you were 7. Your grandmother needed nursing home care. Your grandfather signed the papers. The money went to her medical expenses. You know this. We talked about it." "That's not what Mom says. Mom says you stole it." Brandon filed a lawsuit for financial abuse and mismanagement of trust funds. She handed me another stack of papers. Another lawsuit. I tried to stay calm. "Jessica, please. Look at what's happening. Brandon is destroying me. Can't you see this isn't about love? He's using you." Her face hardened. "No, Dad. For the first time in my life, someone is protecting me from you. Brandon loves me. You never did. You were just controlling Mom and me your whole life. That's why she left you. That's why I should have left you too. I have always loved you, Jessica. Every single day of your life. Then why did you ruin my wedding? Why did you humiliate me in front of everyone? You told me I wasn't invited. Because Brandon said you were trying to control everything. He said the only way I'd ever be free was to set boundaries. I was just trying to be healthy, Dad. But you couldn't handle not being in control, so you destroyed everything. She turned and walked out. I stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe. That night, I felt pain in my chest. Sharp, radiating pain down my left arm. I drove myself to the emergency room, thinking this was it. This was how it ended. The doctor, a young woman named Dr. Rachel Foster, examined me thoroughly. After 2 hours of tests, she came back with results. Mr. Thompson, you didn't have a heart attack, but you came very close. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. Your stress hormones are off the charts. Your body is shutting down from extreme stress. What do I do? You need to eliminate the source of stress immediately. Whatever is happening in your life, you need to step back from it. If you don't, the next event will be a major heart attack, and you might not survive it. I went home that night to my empty house. No business, no daughter, no future, just bills piling up and a body that was giving up. I didn't sleep. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. They released me from the hospital the next morning. I drove home slowly, feeling every one of my 63 years. The house was cold and empty. I'd lived here for 35 years, raised Jessica here, built a life here. Now it felt like a tomb. The mailbox was overflowing. Bills, mostly. Court documents. Letters from suppliers demanding payment. I didn't open any of them. I just set them on the kitchen table and stared at them. My business phone kept ringing. I stopped answering. What was the point? I couldn't help anyone. I couldn't even help myself. Frank showed up at my door that afternoon. He looked worried. Harry, you look terrible. I feel worse. He came inside. We sat at my kitchen table, and he spread out papers between us. I've been investigating Brandon further. Harry, what I found is disturbing. Tell me. 2 years ago, in Colorado, a man named Robert Hastings sued Brandon for fraud. The case was settled quietly. Before that, in Illinois, there were 3 complaints filed with the State Bar Association about Brandon's practices: intimidation, misrepresentation, aggressive tactics that crossed ethical lines. Why wasn't he disbarred? He's smart. He stays just inside the legal boundaries. He knows exactly how far he can push without getting caught. But Harry, there's a pattern. He targets people, destroys them financially, and profits from their collapse. And my daughter married this man. She doesn't know who he really is. He's been manipulating her for 2 years. There was a knock at my door. Frank and I looked at each other. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find a woman in her mid-30s. Dark hair, tired eyes, but standing straight with determination. Are you Harry Thompson? I am. My name is Caroline Brooks. I need to talk to you about Brandon Chen. We invited her inside. She sat at my kitchen table and told us a story that made my blood run cold. 3 years ago, Brandon got engaged to me. We dated for a year. He was charming, successful, everything I thought I wanted. My father owned a small manufacturing company. Brandon convinced me to invest in a business opportunity he was developing. I put in $75,000. My father questioned it. He asked to see documentation, wanted to review the business plan. What happened? I asked. Brandon sued my father. Claimed my father was harassing him, interfering with his business relationships, making threats. It was all lies. But Brandon had recorded every conversation, taken screenshots of every text. He twisted everything to make my father look dangerous. My father had to hire lawyers. The legal fees destroyed him. He lost his business. He had a stroke from the stress. He's in a nursing home now. I'm so sorry, I said quietly. I tracked you down through public records. When I saw Brandon was doing it again, I had to warn you. He won't stop until you're completely destroyed. That's what he does. Frank looked at Caroline. Why didn't you report him? I tried. But he's too smart. He never quite breaks the law. He just bends it until it serves him, and he has powerful friends. His firm protects him. After Caroline left, Frank and I sat in silence for a long moment. Harry, I need to tell you something else. Brandon is planning his next move. He's going to file criminal charges against you. For what? Harassment. Terroristic threats. He's been documenting every call you've made to Jessica. Every text message. He's going to twist them into evidence of stalking and threatening behavior. If he gets you arrested, your business is finished, and your defense becomes impossible. I put my head in my hands. I can't fight this, Frank. I don't have the money. I don't have the strength. Don't give up yet. But I had given up. That night, I found myself sitting in my living room with a bottle of whiskey I hadn't opened in 10 years, since my father's funeral. I looked at it, thought about opening it, thought about just letting everything go. Then I saw the photo album on the shelf. My mother had made it years ago. I pulled it down, opened it, pictures of Jessica as a baby, her first birthday, her first day of school. I remembered every single moment captured in those photos. Her laughter, her curiosity, the way she'd hold my hand when she was scared. There was a letter tucked in the back. I'd forgotten about it. It was from my father, written shortly before he died. He'd given it to me at the hospital, made me promise to read it when I needed it most. I unfolded it now. His handwriting was shaky but clear. Son, life will test you. When it does, remember, a man's character isn't shown in easy times. It's shown when he's on his knees and decides to stand back up. I built something for you, not just with money and property, but with integrity and hard work. Don't let anyone take that from you. Not the business, and especially not your character. When you're at your lowest, that's when you choose who you really are. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the album. My father was right. I was on my knees, but I wasn't dead yet. I called Frank. I'm not giving up, I told him. I'm going to fight. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with truth. We're going to expose what Brandon really is. Good, Frank said, because I think I know how. Over the next 2 weeks, Frank, Caroline, and I met secretly at Frank's office. We formed a plan. Caroline knew Brandon's patterns, his tactics, his weaknesses. Frank knew the legal system inside and out. I knew how to work hard and persist, how to build something from nothing. We started gathering evidence. Real evidence. Caroline provided documentation from her family's case in Colorado. Financial records showing Brandon's fraudulent business dealings. Testimony from her father's doctors about the stress-induced stroke. Proof that Brandon had orchestrated the entire situation. Frank reached into his network of legal contacts. He found 2 other families Brandon had targeted, one in Texas, one in Pennsylvania. Both had similar stories. Both had been destroyed financially. Both had settled quietly to avoid further damage. I hired a private investigator named Walter Jenkins, a retired police detective in his 60s. Walter was thorough and patient. He started digging into Brandon's background. What he found was explosive. Brandon had debts nobody knew about, serious gambling problems. Walter found records from 3 different casinos in Atlantic City. Brandon owed money to people you didn't want to owe money to. He'd been living far beyond his means for years. The fancy car, the expensive clothes, the luxury apartment, all of it was financed with credit cards and loans. Brandon was drowning in debt. The wedding wasn't about love, or even about your property, Walter explained, showing me bank statements he'd obtained through legal channels. This man needs money desperately. The lawsuit, the property grab, all of it is about getting cash fast. But Walter found something even bigger. Brandon's law firm, Morrison & Associates, was under investigation by the State Bar Association, not just for Brandon's individual complaints, but for systematic ethics violations, overcharging clients, misrepresenting case outcomes, aggressive tactics that crossed legal lines. Brandon specifically was mentioned in 7 different complaints. The investigation had been ongoing for 8 months. If it became public, Brandon would likely be disbarred. That's why he needs money now, Frank said, studying the documents. He's going to be forced out of the firm. He knows it. He's trying to grab everything he can before it happens. We had evidence. We had witnesses. We had proof. But before we could use any of it, Brandon struck again. I was at my office, trying to salvage what little was left of the business, when 2 police officers walked in. Harry Thompson? That's me. You're under arrest for making terroristic threats. They handcuffed me right there in front of Brenda and the few remaining employees, read me my rights, walked me out to a patrol car like I was a criminal. At the police station, they showed me the evidence. A voicemail I'd left Brandon 2 weeks earlier. You need to stop this, Brandon. You're going to regret what you're doing. That's a death threat, Mr. Thompson, the detective said. It's not a death threat. I meant he'd regret it morally, ethically. I wasn't threatening violence. That's for the judge to decide. They kept me overnight. I spent the night in a jail cell, lying on a thin mattress, staring at concrete walls. I'd never been arrested in my life. Never even had a speeding ticket. I was released on bail the next morning. Frank picked me up. "Brandon is smart," Frank said as we drove away from the police station. He recorded that voicemail, brought it to a sympathetic prosecutor, and spun it into a criminal case. "Harry, if you're convicted, even of a misdemeanor, your business licenses are revoked. You're finished." The local news picked up the story. Local businessman arrested for threatening son-in-law. Brandon gave interviews to 2 different stations. "I'm just trying to protect my wife from her abusive father," he said, looking earnest and concerned. "He's been unstable since we got married. We're worried for our safety." My reputation was destroyed. People I'd known for 30 years crossed the street to avoid me. Clients I'd worked with forever stopped returning my calls. Thompson Construction Supply officially closed 3 days later. The bank foreclosed on the building. Brenda and the other employees found jobs elsewhere. 15 people lost their livelihoods because of Brandon's schemes. I moved out of my house, into a small apartment across town. The house went into foreclosure proceedings. I packed up 35 years of memories into boxes and left behind the place where I'd raised my daughter. Jessica got married to Brandon at a courthouse. Linda paid for a small reception at a restaurant. Photos appeared on social media. Jessica looked happy, smiling in her simple white dress. I saw those photos, and something inside me broke completely. Maybe I really had lost her forever. I was at my lowest point. No business, no home, no daughter, criminal charges pending, civil lawsuits waiting. My health was deteriorating. I'd lost 30 pounds. I wasn't sleeping. Dr. Foster had called me twice, worried. Then my phone rang. A number I recognized. Gregory Walsh, Linda's husband. "Harry, I need to talk to you. Privately." We met at a diner on the edge of town. Gregory looked uncomfortable. "I don't know how to say this, so I'll just say it. Linda has been lying to me. About a lot of things. I found text messages between her and Brandon. Harry, they're planning something." "What do you mean?" "They're going to divorce Jessica. Take community property. Brandon never loved her. This whole thing is a con. Your daughter is the real victim, and she has no idea." Gregory showed me the texts on his phone. Conversations between Linda and Brandon, going back months, discussing the property value, discussing the lawsuit settlements, discussing how to manipulate Jessica. One text from Brandon made me sick. "Once we drain Harry and get the property, we'll split everything. The marriage will last 6 months max. Jessica is just a means to an end." Linda's response: "Perfect. She's already turned against him completely. This is easier than I thought." I read those texts 3 times. They were using my daughter. Using her love, her trust, her desire to be a good wife. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked Gregory. "Because I thought I married a good woman, but Linda is not who I thought she was, and I can't stand by and watch an innocent girl get destroyed. Jessica doesn't deserve this. You don't deserve this. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." I sat there in that diner booth, holding Gregory's phone, looking at proof that the entire nightmare had been orchestrated from the beginning. "We can save her," Gregory said, "but we need to move fast. Brandon is planning to file for divorce in 3 months. He's already met with a lawyer." I looked at Gregory. "Why would you help me?" "Because it's the right thing to do." I tried to reach Jessica with this information. I called her new number. Blocked. I sent emails. Unread. I wrote letters. Returned unopened. Brandon had complete control over her. She was isolated, convinced that everyone in her life except Brandon and Linda was toxic. Frank tried reaching out through official channels. No response. Walter tried to find opportunities to speak with her. She was never alone. Brandon was always there. The stress was killing me. Literally. I was at the grocery store, trying to remember what I needed to buy, when everything went dark. I woke up on the floor, paramedics standing over me. "Sir, can you hear me? You've collapsed. We're taking you to the hospital." This time, it wasn't a close call. It was the real thing. Dr. Foster stood by my hospital bed, her expression grave. "Mr. Thompson, you've had a heart attack. A mild one, but a heart attack nonetheless. You're lucky you were in a public place. If you'd been home alone, you might have died." "How bad is it?" "Your heart sustained minor damage. With medication, lifestyle changes, and rest, you can recover. But Harry, if you don't eliminate the stress in your life, the next one will kill you. I'm not exaggerating. Your body cannot take any more." I lay in that hospital bed, hooked up to monitors, listening to my heartbeat on the machine, 78 beats per minute. Each one, a reminder that I was still alive, but barely. Frank came to visit. He brought more bad news. The criminal trial is in 2 weeks. The first civil lawsuit goes to court the following month. Harry, we have all this evidence about Brandon, but I'm not sure we can stop the legal proceedings fast enough. Even if we expose him, the damage might already be done. What are my options? We can use the evidence to negotiate. Show Brandon what we have, force him to back down, but that might let him escape justice. Or we can go public, expose everything, and hope the criminal charges get dropped. But that takes time you might not have. What do you recommend? Frank hesitated. Honestly, I think you need to consider just walking away. Drop the fight. Let Brandon have what he wants. Save your life. I can't do that. Not while Jessica is in danger. Harry, you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. I was considering Frank's words, thinking about just giving up, when there was a knock on my hospital room door. Jessica stood there. She looked terrible. Thin, exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. She was wearing a long-sleeved shirt despite the summer heat. When she moved, I saw a bruise on her wrist. "Dad," she said quietly, "can I come in?" Of course. She sat in the chair next to my bed. For a long moment, she didn't say anything, just stared at her hands. "Dad, I need help." Those 4 words broke my heart and filled me with hope at the same time. "Tell me what's happening." Brandon has been different since the wedding. Really different. He's angry all the time. He controls everything. My phone, my computer, where I go, who I talk to. I tried to visit a friend last week, and he followed me. When I got home, he screamed at me for an hour. "Has he hurt you?" She pulled up her sleeve. There were bruises on both arms, finger marks. He grabs me when he's angry. Last night, he pushed me against a wall. "I'm scared, Dad. I tried to leave yesterday. I packed a bag while he was at work. But when I got to the door, he was there. He'd come home early. He said if I try to leave, he'll destroy me like he destroyed you. He showed me documents. I'm $40,000 in debt from credit cards I didn't know I had. He opened them in my name. He's ruined my credit. If I leave, he says he'll make sure I never work again, never have anything. I wanted to jump out of that hospital bed and kill Brandon Chen with my bare hands, but I forced myself to stay calm. You're safe now. You came to me. We're going to fix this. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I believed their lies. Mom and Brandon told me you were controlling, that you never really loved me. They had conversations, texts, all this evidence that you were terrible, but it was all fake. I saw texts between Mom and Brandon on his laptop. They've been planning this from the beginning. I'm so stupid. You're not stupid. You were manipulated by people who are very good at manipulation. I said horrible things to you. I hurt you. The wedding, the lawsuits, everything. Can you ever forgive me? I reached out and took her hand. Jessica, I never stopped loving you. Not for 1 second. That's what real love is. It doesn't give up, even when it's rejected. I forgive you completely. She started crying. I held her hand while she cried, and I cried too. When she'd calmed down, I called Frank, then Walter, then Gregory. We had a meeting right there in my hospital room, all of us together, planning our next move. We have evidence of Brandon's fraud, Frank said. We have proof of the manipulation. We have witnesses, and now we have Jessica. What about the lawsuits? I asked. If Jessica is willing to testify, willing to admit she was manipulated, the lawsuits fall apart. The marriage itself might be invalid. Brandon committed fraud. Walter added, I found something else. Brandon is still legally married to someone in Florida. He never divorced his first wife. His marriage to Jessica is bigamy. That's a felony. Jessica's face went pale. He's married to someone else? Has been for 7 years, Walter confirmed. Marriage license is on file in Miami-Dade County. So our marriage isn't real? Not legally. No. She looked relieved and horrified at the same time. Frank laid out the plan. We confront Brandon. We show him everything we have. The fraud evidence, the bigamy proof, the witness testimony, the abuse documentation. We give him one chance to walk away quietly, or we destroy him publicly and criminally. When? I asked. The criminal hearing is in 3 days. We do it then. In front of the judge, in front of everyone. We lay it all out. Jessica looked at me. Dad, I'm scared. Brandon is dangerous when he's cornered. I know. But we're going to end this. I promise. That night, Jessica stayed at a hotel, under a fake name. Gregory paid for it, and stood guard in the hallway. We couldn't risk Brandon finding her before the hearing. I lay in my hospital bed, hooked up to monitors, and thought about my father's letter. Life had tested me. I'd been on my knees, but I was standing back up one more time. 3 more days. Then we'd end this nightmare. Dr. Foster wanted to keep me in the hospital longer. but I checked myself out against medical advice. The criminal hearing was in 2 hours. I needed to be there. Frank picked me up. We drove to the courthouse in silence. Jessica was already there with Gregory and Walter. She looked terrified but determined. Brandon arrived with his lawyer, a man named David Pritchard. Brandon saw Jessica standing with us, and his face went dark with rage. He started toward her, but courthouse security stepped between them. "We need to talk," Frank said to David Pritchard. "Privately. Before this hearing starts." We went into a small conference room. Brandon, his lawyer, Frank, myself, and Walter. Jessica waited outside with Gregory. Frank laid a folder on the table. "Brandon, we know everything. The fraud in Colorado, the complaints to the Bar Association, the investigation into your firm, the gambling debts, the shell companies, the plan to steal Harry's property, the manipulation of Jessica, all of it." Brandon's face remained calm, but I saw his jaw clench. Frank continued, "We have documentation. We have witnesses. We have recorded conversations. We have proof." He opened the folder, spread out copies of bank statements, complaint filings, witness affidavits, text messages between Brandon and Linda. "We also have this." Walter placed a marriage certificate on the table. "Miami-Dade County, Florida. Your marriage to Amanda Reeves, dated 7 years ago. Still valid. Still legal. Which makes your marriage to Jessica bigamy, a third-degree felony." Brandon's lawyer looked at the certificate, then at Brandon. "Is this real?" Brandon said nothing. "Here are your options," Frank said calmly. "You withdraw all lawsuits. You confess the manipulation to Jessica. You return all money you've taken from her, which we calculate to be about $63,000, including the fraudulent credit cards. You leave town quietly, and never contact Jessica or Harry again. In return, we don't file criminal charges for bigamy, fraud, or abuse. We don't report you to the state bar. We don't expose everything to the media." "You're bluffing," Brandon said, but his voice was shaky. Walter placed a small recording device on the table and pressed play. Brandon's voice filled the room. "Once we drain Harry and get the property, we'll split everything. The marriage will last 6 months max. Jessica is just a means to an end." Linda's voice. "Perfect. She's already turned against him completely. This is easier than I thought." Brandon's lawyer stood up. "I need to speak with my client alone." They left the room. Frank, Walter, and I waited. 15 minutes later, they came back. "My client agrees to your terms," David Pritchard said stiffly. Over the next 2 hours, we sat in that conference room, while Brandon signed documents. Withdrawal of all lawsuits, confession of fraud and manipulation, notarized. Agreement to pay restitution to Jessica. Agreement to leave the state and never contact either of us again. The criminal charges were dropped. The judge, once informed of the circumstances, dismissed the case immediately and apologized to me. Brandon left the courthouse without looking at any of us. David Pritchard followed, looking disgusted with his client. Jessica stood in the courthouse hallway, watching Brandon leave. "Is it really over?" she asked. "It's over," I said. We found out later that Brandon's law firm fired him that same day. The Bar Association investigation went public 2 weeks later. Brandon was disbarred within a month. Linda, facing potential charges as a co-conspirator, divorced Gregory and moved to Arizona. We never heard from her again. Jessica and I began the long process of rebuilding. Not just our relationship, but our lives. Gregory felt guilty about Linda's role. He offered to help me financially, but I couldn't accept charity. Instead, he became a business partner. We reopened Thompson Construction Supply together, smaller than before but solid. Gregory's business experience and my industry knowledge made a good combination. Several of my old business contacts reached out once they learned the truth. They'd been fed lies by Brandon, but now they understood what had really happened. Within 6 months, we had steady work again. Jessica came to work with me. She wanted to learn the business, to be part of rebuilding what she'd helped destroy. At first, it was awkward. But slowly, day by day, we found our way back to each other. One afternoon, about 8 months after the courthouse confrontation, Jessica and I were in the office late. Everyone else had gone home. We were reviewing supply orders for a big project. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "How did you forgive me? After everything I did, everything I said. How?" I thought about it carefully. "Jessica, I learned something through all this pain. Love isn't about being appreciated or valued. It's about being faithful even when you're rejected. Real love doesn't give up. It doesn't keep score. It doesn't wait for the other person to deserve it. It just loves. But I hurt you so badly. You were hurt too. By people who should have protected you. Brandon manipulated you. Your mother manipulated you. You were a victim in this too. I should have trusted you. Maybe. But you're human. Humans make mistakes. What matters is what we do after the mistakes. You came back. You chose truth over lies. You chose love over fear. That takes real courage. She was quiet for a moment. I want to be like you when I grow up. I laughed. You're 30 years old. I know. But I still have a lot of growing to do. A year after the courthouse, Jessica met a man named Thomas Grant at her church. He was a high school teacher, kind and patient. They dated slowly, carefully. Jessica was understandably cautious about relationships. When Thomas asked for my blessing to marry Jessica, we had a long conversation. I asked him hard questions about his intentions, his character, his understanding of commitment. He answered every question honestly and thoughtfully. Mr. Thompson, I know Jessica has been through trauma. I know trust is hard for her. I'm willing to spend my whole life proving I'm worthy of that trust. I love your daughter for who she is, not for what I can get from her. I just want to build a life with her. A good life. A honest life. I gave them my blessing. Their wedding was simple. A small church, 50 guests, flowers from the local grocery store. Jessica wore a dress she bought off the rack. It was perfect. I walked her down the aisle. This time, no one told me I wasn't invited. This time, Jessica held my arm tightly and whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me, Dad. You saved my life." I whispered back, "That's what fathers do." At the reception, Frank raised a glass to toast the couple. To Jessica and Thomas. May your marriage be filled with honesty, respect, and real love. After the toast, Frank pulled me aside. "You did good, Harry. I just loved my daughter. Sometimes that's all you can do. And sometimes that's enough." I stood there, watching Jessica dance with Thomas. She was laughing, genuinely happy. The haunted look was gone from her eyes. Gregory approached. "You know, a year ago I thought Linda was the best thing that ever happened to me. Now I realize she taught me what not to accept in a relationship. Sometimes our worst experiences lead us to better places." "I think you're right." The reception went late into the evening. As I was leaving, Jessica ran up to me. "Dad, wait. I wanted to give you something." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000. "What's this?" "Thomas and I have been saving. We wanted to pay you back. For the wedding that didn't happen. For the business you almost lost. For everything." "Jessica, I can't accept this. Please, Dad. It's important to me. I need to make things right." I looked at the check, then at my daughter's face. She needed this. Not for me, but for herself. "Okay," I said, "but I'm putting it in a college fund for your future children." She hugged me tightly. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, sweetheart." I drove home that night to the modest house I'd bought after losing the old one. It was smaller, simpler, but it was paid for and it was mine. I thought about my father's letter, about being tested, about being on your knees and choosing to stand up. Life had knocked me down. Hard. It had taken almost everything from me, but it hadn't taken the things that mattered most. My integrity, my capacity to love, my daughter. I'd learned that real strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up. I'd learned that love isn't about control or conditions. It's about faithfulness and forgiveness. I'd learned that your character is revealed not in easy times, but when everything is stripped away and all you have left is your choice about who you'll be. Brandon had tried to destroy me. In some ways, he'd succeeded. But in the most important ways, he'd failed. Because I was still here. My daughter was safe. And we'd rebuilt something better than what we'd lost. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the refining fire that burns away everything false and leaves only what's true. I'd been refined, so had Jessica. And we'd come through the fire together. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had someone in your life try to turn your own family against you? How did you handle it? What would you have done in my situation? Share your story in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of the power of forgiveness and unconditional love, please hit that like button. It helps more people find this story who might need to hear it. And if you want to hear more stories about overcoming betrayal, rebuilding after loss, and the strength of the human spirit, subscribe to this channel. We share real stories about real people facing real challenges. Finally, share this with someone who needs to be reminded that love never gives up, that truth eventually wins, and that standing back up after being knocked down is what defines our character. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gives you strength for whatever you're facing today. Remember, the darkest moments often come right before the breakthrough. Don't give up. Keep fighting for what's right. Keep loving even when it hurts. That's how we win. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people you love.